China has more warships than the United States Navy. That is not a projection. That is not a future scenario. That is the current reality, right now in 2026. The People's Liberation Army Navy operates somewhere between 370 and 400 active warships and submarines. The U.S. Navy operates around 290. By raw ship count, China already won that race. Headlines have been screaming about this for years. Politicians cite it in budget hearings. Defense analysts write about it in think tank reports. The number circulates constantly. China has more ships. But here is what almost nobody in those headlines explains. Ship count is one of the least useful ways to measure a navy. Today, we are going to go deeper than the number. We are going to look at what China actually has, what the U.S. actually has, and why. Despite 370-plus ships, China still cannot match the United States Navy in a sustained open ocean conflict. Not yet. That word matters. We will come back to it. Start with the raw numbers, because they are real and they are significant. China's shipbuilding output over the last 15 years has been one of the most dramatic military buildups in modern history. In 2005, the People's Liberation Army Navy was a coastal defense force, large in hull count but built around small patrol boats, aging frigates, and a handful of destroyers that would not have survived a serious engagement. By 2026, that force has been fundamentally transformed. China now operates 3 aircraft carriers. The Liaoning, which began as a refurbished Soviet hull purchased from Ukraine, entered service in 2012. The Shandong, the first domestically designed Chinese carrier, commissioned in 2019. The Fujian, China's most advanced carrier, equipped with electromagnetic catapults, the same technology used on the USS Gerald R. Ford, began sea trials in 2022 and achieved full operational status. A 4th carrier is almost certainly under construction at Dalian Shipyard right now. Naval analysts watching satellite imagery say the evidence is near conclusive. Beyond carriers, China operates 8 Type 055 destroyers, warships so large and capable that the U.S. Navy reclassifies them as cruisers by American standards. Each one displaces over 12,000 tons and carries 112 vertical launch cells for missiles. 8 more are under construction. China has between 25 and 30 Type 052D destroyers in service, with more being launched continuously. It has over 40 Type 054A frigates. It has 73 submarines. It has over 100 amphibious warfare ships, more landing capacity than any other navy on Earth, by a significant margin. The pace of construction is the part that gets less attention than it should. China is building warships faster than any nation in history during peacetime. Its shipbuilding industry accounts for roughly half of all commercial ship tonnage launched globally every year. The Office of Naval Intelligence assessed that China's shipbuilding capacity exceeds the United States by a factor of 232. 232 times. Let that sit for a moment. So why can China not match the U.S. Navy? The first answer is tonnage, and it fundamentally changes how you read the ship count comparison. The U.S. Navy has around 290 ships. Those ships collectively displace approximately 4.5 million tons. China's fleet of 370-plus ships displaces approximately 2 million tons, less than half. Why the gap? Because American ships are, on average, much larger. The United States operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Each one displaces around 100,000 tons. The USS Gerald R. Ford class is 110,000 tons fully loaded, the largest warship ever built. 11 of them in service simultaneously. China's 3 carriers are between 55,000 and 80,000 tons. They are capable ships, but they are not in the same weight class. American cruisers and destroyers are built large, with long-range sensors, deep magazines, and extensive combat systems. A single Arleigh Burke-class destroyer can carry 96 missiles in its vertical launch system. The latest Flight 3 variants carry the AN/S PY-6 radar, which the Navy describes as 35 times more capable than the system it replaced. When you measure by total combat displacement, the weight of the fighting ships, not counting auxiliary vessels and tugboats, the U.S. Navy leads by nearly 2 to 1, even with fewer hulls. The second answer is geography, and this one reshapes the entire strategic picture. China's Navy is concentrated in one theater. Its 3 carrier groups, its destroyers, its submarines, they are all operating in or near the Western Pacific. The South China Sea, the East China Sea, the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. Navy operates globally, simultaneously. On any given day, the U.S. Navy has carrier strike groups deployed in the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, the Western Pacific, and rotating through the Indian Ocean. The 5th Fleet covers the Middle East. The 6th Fleet covers Europe and the Atlantic. The 7th Fleet, the largest of the forward-deployed fleets, covers the entire Indo-Pacific, from the coast of Africa to the international dateline. This is not just a philosophical difference. It is a structural one. When the U.S. Navy needs to send forces to the Pacific, it draws from a global pool. When China needs to extend its reach beyond the first island chain, the arc of islands running from Japan through Taiwan through the Philippines, it is projecting far from home for the first time in its modern history. China has one overseas military base, Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa. The United States has military agreements and base access arrangements across dozens of countries on every inhabited continent. Logistics is not a glamorous subject, but navies run on fuel, ammunition, replacement parts, and food. In a sustained conflict, the side that can keep its ships supplied at sea across thousands of miles wins. The U.S. Navy has 32 years of continuously refined underway replenishment operations. China is learning those skills now. The third answer is submarines, and it is the most important one for actual warfare. The U.S. Navy operates approximately 50 nuclear-powered attack submarines. These are the Virginia-class and Los Angeles-class boats currently in service, vessels capable of operating indefinitely at speed underwater, launching cruise missiles, sinking surface ships, and tracking enemy submarines in every ocean on Earth. China operates 73 submarines, but the composition matters enormously. Of those, only about 10 are nuclear-powered attack submarines. The rest are diesel-electric, conventional submarines that are quieter when running on batteries, but must surface or snorkel regularly to recharge, severely limiting their operational range and endurance. In the Pacific Ocean, with its vast distances, nuclear propulsion is not a luxury. It is a fundamental capability difference. The Virginia-class can cross the Pacific without surfacing. It can operate in the Philippine Sea, the South China Sea, or the waters around Taiwan without ever being detectable from satellite imagery. Chinese diesel boats operating that far from home face serious endurance constraints. Beyond propulsion, American submarine crews train more hours and in more realistic conditions than any submarine force on Earth. The last time an American submarine fired a torpedo in anger was 1945. But the institutional knowledge of how to find, track, and engage enemy submarines, accumulated across 80 years of continuous operations, lives in the people and the doctrine, not just the hardware. On March 4, 2026, USS Charlotte demonstrated what that accumulated capability looks like when applied. A Los Angeles-class attack submarine, a design first introduced in 1976, sank the Iris Dina, one of Iran's most capable frigates, 2,000 miles from Iran, in the Indian Ocean, first torpedo fired in combat by the U.S. Navy since World War II. China's submarines have never fired in anger, not once. The gap in institutional knowledge between a force that has never fought and a force that has been continuously in operations since 1944 is not measured in hardware. It is measured in something harder to build. The fourth answer is carrier aviation, and this is where the gap is both most visible and most debated. China's Fujian is a genuine achievement. It is the first non-American carrier to use electromagnetic launch catapults. It can launch heavier aircraft with more fuel and ordnance than the ski jump carriers operated by every other navy. China's J-15 naval fighter, in its newer variants, carries the YJ-15 anti-ship missile with a reported range of 1,800 kilometers. But a carrier is not just a ship. A carrier is an ecosystem. Effective carrier operations require a trained air wing, pilots who can launch, complete missions, and recover aboard a moving ship at night, in all weather conditions. It requires controllers who can coordinate dozens of aircraft in complex strike packages. It requires the entire carrier strike group, the cruisers, destroyers, and submarines that protect the carrier, to work together as a single integrated system. The U.S. Navy has been doing this since the 1940s. Every carrier strike group goes through an intensive training cycle called Comp2X before deployment, a multi-week exercise simulating every kind of threat scenario the group will face at sea. Then it deploys for 9 months, executing real missions in real conditions continuously. China conducted its first dual carrier exercise, 2 carrier groups operating together, in the South China Sea in 2024. In 2025, Chinese carrier groups ventured beyond the first island chain for the first time. One crossed the second island chain, which represents a genuinely significant operational milestone. China is learning. The pace of learning is faster than most American analysts predicted 5 years ago. But the accumulated experience gap, measured in carrier landings, in strike package launches, in real-world intercept operations, is still enormous. The fifth answer is the Allied network, and this one almost never appears in the ship count comparisons. The U.S. Navy does not operate alone. Japan operates the Maritime Self-Defense Force, the most capable non-American naval force in the Pacific, with 48 major surface combatants, 22 submarines, and 2 helicopter carriers that are being converted to handle F-35B fighters. South Korea operates 18 destroyers and frigates, multiple submarines, and one of the most sophisticated naval shipbuilding industries outside the United States. Australia has committed to the AUKUS agreement, which will result in Australian submariners receiving training on U.S. Navy nuclear boats, and eventually Australia operating Virginia-class or their derivative submarines. The United Kingdom, France, Canada, and other NATO allies rotate carrier groups and destroyer deployments through the Indo-Pacific regularly. In any realistic scenario involving the Western Pacific, the U.S. Navy is not fielding 290 ships. It is coordinating with allied forces that, combined, significantly exceed what any single nation operates. China has no equivalent network. Russia, the only country with comparable naval technology, is in no position to project significant naval power to the Pacific after its losses in Ukraine. China's relationships with Pakistan, Cambodia, and a handful of other nations offer limited basing access. Nothing comparable to the interlocking alliance system the U.S. has maintained since 1945. The sixth answer is the shipbuilding gap, and this is the one that makes American naval strategists most uncomfortable about the future. China's shipbuilding industry accounts for approximately half of all commercial tonnage launched worldwide every year. The United States accounts for less than 1% of global commercial shipbuilding. American naval yards are at capacity just building and maintaining the current fleet. Wait times for repairs at U.S. shipyards have extended to the point where some ships spend more time in maintenance queues than at sea. A Ford-class aircraft carrier takes approximately 5 to 7 years to build in the United States. China built and launched the Type 055 destroyer in batches. 8 hulls in rapid succession, with the industrial pipeline already set up for a second batch of 8. The relevance of this becomes clear in one specific scenario: a prolonged war. In World War II, the United States had 7 carriers when the war began, and 99 by the time Japan surrendered. It built that fleet because its industrial capacity was overwhelming. Today, that industrial advantage sits in China. If a conflict with China lasted not weeks but months or years, and both sides took significant losses, China's ability to replace ships and China's ability to reconstitute a damaged fleet would exceed America's. The Foreign Affairs Journal put it plainly: The U.S. faces the same strategic problem Japan faced in 1941. A qualitatively superior force with inferior industrial backing, hoping to win before the other side's numbers become decisive. The U.S. Navy knows this. It is why every recent budget submission includes requests for expanded shipyard capacity. It is why the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act included over $600 million specifically for shipyard workforce stabilization. It is why the Trump administration's Golden Fleet Initiative and programs like the USS Defiant battleship exist, an attempt to project enough qualitative superiority to offset the growing quantitative gap. Whether that strategy succeeds depends on variables that no analyst can currently predict. What does China still need? It needs experience, real operations, in real conditions, under real pressure, not exercises, not scripted training scenarios. The kind of experience that only comes from sustained deployment operations and, ultimately, from combat. It needs logistics infrastructure. One base in Djibouti is not a global logistics network. Until China can reliably sustain forces far from home, its reach remains constrained. It needs carrier aviation maturity. Flying off a carrier is one of the most demanding forms of military aviation on Earth. China's carrier pilots are learning. They are not there yet. It needs submarine parity. 10 nuclear attack submarines against 50 is not a competitive position in the deep ocean. The Type 09V attack submarine currently in development at Bohai Shipyard, a 9,000-ton boat with pump jet propulsion and vertical launch cells, represents China's attempt to close this gap. It is not closed yet, and it needs time. All of these things take time. The question, the one that drives every war game run at the Naval War College, every fleet exercise in the Pacific, every classified assessment sent to the Pentagon, is how much time China has before the window opens. Here is where we land. China has 370-plus ships. The U.S. has around 290. By hull count, China leads. By tonnage, the U.S. leads nearly 2-to-1. By carrier capability, the U.S. leads by every meaningful measure. By submarine capability, the U.S. leads decisively. By combat experience, the U.S. has no peer. But China is building, faster than any navy in history. Its newest ships are not inferior copies of Western designs. They are competitive platforms with capable sensors, modern missiles, and growing crews of increasingly trained sailors. Its carriers are getting better with each deployment. Its shipyards are producing at a rate that the United States cannot match. In 2026, if a conflict began in the Western Pacific, the U.S. Navy would have decisive advantages. Not because the Chinese fleet is weak, it is not, but because the accumulated experience, the carrier depth, the submarine capability, and the Allied network still represent a gap that cannot be closed by hull count alone. But every year that passes, that gap narrows. Not yet. That word was in the title of this video. It was not accidental. The U.S. Navy's advantage over China is real. It is also shrinking. The question that matters, the question that no public source can definitively answer, is whether the U.S. can maintain that advantage long enough to prevent a conflict, or whether the narrowing gap itself changes the calculations that determine whether a conflict happens at all. 3 aircraft carriers in 2026. Projected 9 by 2035. A shipbuilding industry 232 times larger than its rivals. Not yet, but the clock is running. Let's go one level deeper on each of the factors we covered, because the headlines rarely give you the full picture. On tonnage, the comparison between U.S. and Chinese ships is not just about size. It is about what size enables. A larger ship carries more fuel, meaning longer range without refueling. It carries more missiles, meaning more magazine depth in a sustained engagement. It carries larger sensors, meaning better radar range, better situational awareness, better targeting. And it carries more damage control capability, meaning it can take a hit and keep fighting. When the U.S. built the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in the late 1980s, the The designers made a deliberate choice to make it larger than necessary for the immediate threat environment. The extra size bought magazine depth, sensor space, and growth margin for systems that did not yet exist. That decision meant the same hull design, first commissioned in 1991, is still being produced in 2026 in a significantly upgraded variant that carries completely different weapons and radar systems than the original. China's Type 052D destroyer, by comparison, is a capable modern warship, but it displaces around 7,000 tons, less than the 9,000-ton Arleigh Burke. The Type 055 at 12,000-plus tons is closer to an American cruiser than a destroyer. China built it specifically to compete at the high end, a recognition that the Type 052D, for all its capabilities, was not large enough to host the systems needed for area air defense at the fleet level. The lesson China drew from studying American ship design is the same lesson that produced the Arleigh Burke in the first place. In naval warfare, the ship that can see further, shoot further, and absorb more damage usually wins. Size is not vanity. Size is combat power. On the submarine question specifically, there is a dimension that does not appear in most public analysis: acoustic signature. Detecting a submarine is primarily an acoustic problem. Nuclear submarines produce noise from their reactors, their pumps, their propulsion systems. The quieter the boat, the harder it is to detect. American submarine designers have spent 70 years relentlessly pursuing acoustic quieting, reducing every source of noise through careful engineering, vibration isolation, and propeller design. The U.S. Virginia class is widely assessed as the quietest nuclear attack submarine ever built. Its exact acoustic performance is classified, but its reputation in naval intelligence communities is well established. Multiple Allied navies have specifically structured their anti-submarine warfare programs around the assumption that Virginia-class boats cannot be reliably detected by current-generation sensors at tactically relevant ranges. China's nuclear boats, the Type 093 Shang class, have been assessed by Western intelligence as significantly louder than their American counterparts. Satellite imagery and open-source analysis suggests the Type 093 is roughly comparable in acoustic performance to American Los Angeles-class submarines from the 1980s, boats that are currently being retired from U.S. service because they have been superseded. The new Type 09V, currently in development, appears to represent a genuine generational improvement. Pump jet propulsion, X-form rudders, a larger hull form that allows better acoustic isolation. It is a serious design, but it has not yet entered service. And American designers are not standing still. The Block 6 Virginia class, currently in planning, incorporates additional acoustic improvements that will push performance further ahead. Submarine warfare is a game of detection probability. A quieter boat is not just harder to find. It changes the entire tactical situation. An adversary that cannot reliably locate your submarines must plan as if they could be anywhere. That uncertainty shapes how it deploys its surface ships, how it routes its convoys, and how it makes operational decisions. The acoustic advantage the U.S. Navy holds in nuclear submarines has strategic effects that go far beyond the direct combat capability of any individual boat. On carrier aviation, one specific number tells the experience story more clearly than any general statement. Every U.S. Navy carrier pilot completes approximately 100 carrier landings before deploying operationally. A carrier landing, technically called a trap, involves approaching a moving ship at around 150 miles per hour, engaging a wire stretched across the deck with a hook on the aircraft's tail, and going from flight speed to zero in about 2 seconds. The margin for error is measured in feet, not yards. Doing it at night, in bad weather, after a 6-hour mission, is considered one of the most demanding skills in military aviation. The U.S. Navy completes approximately 25,000 carrier landings per year across its fleet. Its pilots do this continuously, in all conditions, across the world's oceans. China's carrier pilots are training hard. The pace of flight operations from Fujian has visibly increased with each deployment cycle. But the cumulative landing count, the institutional knowledge of what happens when systems fail in unusual combinations, the experience of night operations in monsoon conditions far from home, these things accumulate over decades, not years. There is no shortcut to experience. China cannot buy it, copy it, or engineer around it. It can only build it, one carrier landing at a time. On the Allied network, consider specifically what Japan brings to any Pacific scenario. Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force operates Aegis destroyers, the same combat management system that forms the backbone of the U.S. Navy's surface fleet. Japanese Aegis ships communicate natively with American Aegis ships, sharing targeting data, sensor tracks, and missile engagements through a common network. In an air defense scenario, a Japanese destroyer and an American destroyer can coordinate their missile shots as if they were a single integrated system, even if they are 200 miles apart. This interoperability is not accidental. It was built deliberately over 30 years of exercises, hardware coordination, and communication protocol development. It represents an investment that China has no equivalent of with any ally. South Korea has similar Aegis integration. Australia is acquiring it. The UK operates compatible systems. In the Pacific theater specifically, the combined Aegis network, American, Japanese, South Korean, and Australian ships, represents an air defense architecture that no regional adversary can currently penetrate with confidence. China's response to this network has been to invest heavily in anti-ship missiles. The DF-21D and DF-26 ballistic missiles, designed to threaten carriers at ranges beyond 1,000 kilometers, and the YJ-18 cruise missile, designed to overwhelm ship defenses through supersonic terminal approaches. These are genuinely capable weapons that have fundamentally changed how the U.S. Navy plans for Pacific operations. But the anti-ship missile threat and the Allied network are not sequential problems. They exist simultaneously. Penetrating a missile defense network composed of a dozen Aegis ships covering each other's blind spots, while simultaneously trying to locate and target submarines operating in your rear, while your own logistics chain stretches thousands of miles back to home ports. That is the operational problem China faces. The 370-ship fleet does not resolve it. It is a factor in it, but not the deciding one. One more element that rarely appears in the public discussion: the difference between what a Navy can do and what it is designed to do. The U.S. Navy was designed for power projection. Its carriers, its amphibious groups, its logistics train, all of it is structured around the ability to show up anywhere on Earth and fight. That is what 80 years of forward deployment and blue water operations look like. China's Navy, even in 2026, is still primarily structured around area denial. Its greatest strength is in the waters close to China, inside the first island chain, within range of shore-based missiles and fighter aircraft, in waters that Chinese submarines know better than any outside force. The anti-ship missiles, the submarine force, the massive Coast Guard presence, these are tools designed to make it catastrophically expensive for an enemy to operate near China. That is a legitimate and effective military strategy. But it is different from the strategy required to project power across an ocean, sustain a carrier group 3,000 miles from home, and maintain sea control in waters not covered by your own shore-based systems. The U.S. Navy does the second thing. The Chinese Navy is becoming capable of the first and learning the second. Whether it completes that transition before the strategic situation in the Pacific reaches a point of crisis is the central question of naval competition in the 21st century. So let's end where we started. China has 370-plus ships. The U.S. has around 290. The number is real. The gap in what those ships can do is also real. But the direction of travel matters as much as the current position. In 2010, China had no operational carriers. In 2026, it has 3, with a 4th under construction. In 2010, China's nuclear submarines were assessed as a generation behind American boats. In 2026, the new Type 09 Vi represents a genuine attempt at closing that gap. In 2010, Chinese carrier pilots had never launched from an electromagnetic catapult. In 2026, they are doing it regularly. The U.S. Navy's advantages are real. Its experience is genuine. Its technology is still ahead in most categories. Its allied network is irreplaceable in any realistic time frame. But the trajectory tells you something about where this goes. 3 carriers today, 9 by 2035 if current projections hold. A shipbuilding industry that outproduces the United States 232 to 1. A training program that is accelerating with every deployment. Not yet, but the clock is running. And the U.S. Navy, for the first time in 80 years, is in a race it is not guaranteed to win.